All right. It's been a long time, guys. Welcome back. After almost 10 years of making videos, I have not been that good at presenting anything to you guys. I'm not a tech guy. But here's what I've come up with after all this time. My goal is to show you why I believe that all of the land on Earth is not just giants and titans and dragons and fallen angels, but it's literally what the constellations in our sky depict. This is the best thing that I could come up with to show you what I'm trying to say. I've got regular pictures, I've got constellations, I've got just some other types of pictures on a few things to give a little, backstory or example. I really don't know where to begin with this. I figure I'm going to start in this area here because there's just so much going on in this part. Bear with me. So what I want to take a look at first is Loki, or perhaps I would say Lucifer, and his children and his horse. So I'm going to show you guys some pictures real quick, just kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about here. And I apologize. I couldn't, put everything on the land. Obviously, I don't want it in the way, so I have limited space putting certain pictures. But let's start here. So, for example, we've got Loki. He's got his children with him. This is Fenrir the wolf, his daughter Hel or Hela, his son Jormungandr the snake. He's got his horse Sleipnir. Couple other characters to the story. I'm not really going to get into them. So oftentimes you'll see Loki or Lucifer depicted sitting cross-legged as some sort of maybe a crown or horns or something. Again, with his kids Fenrir and Jormungandr. Hel or Hela is also depicted as being like the goddess of hell or the underworld. She's often depicted as being half dead, as you can see right here from the waist down usually. She is half dead. Take note of Fenrir, the way that he is laying here. Fenrir was, there's a whole backstory behind him as to how he was bound by, it's actually a pretty cool story, something that was made by the dwarves or whatever, but Wolf, son of Loki, who was bound by the gods until he breaks free on the day of Ragnarok, in which he will join in the assault on Asgard. Immensely strong, he was greatly feared by the gods. Okay, so we'll take a look at Fenrir, and I believe Fenrir is going to be represented by Canis Minor. Let's back out and take a look at some of this here. So, first up, I want to say that that Loki or Lucifer would be sitting right here. If you can imagine, like I had here, he's sitting cross-legged, if you will. I believe that the wing of Lucifer is Canada. This is his wingspan, or whatever you want to say. Next to him, he has his daughter Hel or Hela, standing here, represented by the constellation Virgo. So, take a look at Virgo. and usually depicted as holding the wheat. If you can picture this as being like the head, her body area, and whatever clothing she had draped over her, holding the wheat or something here. I believe, and maybe I'm mistaken by something here, but the best example I could try and pick up on for Lucifer is going to be Cassiopeia. Again, just real quick, we'll take a look. Sitting. That one kind of made sense to me. Here's just another picture example of how big the snake Jorgenminder is, and with the other two kids or whatever here. I believe that Jorgenminder is wrapped up right overhead. That his body comes up, his snake body, and then he has this big snake head wrapped up right over him. And this would be, I'm sorry about the way that it spins, guys, represented by the constellation of Draco. And I'm trying to see what Draco's next to, but so you've got this huge serpent wrapped up, comes up like this, the head overhead. Now, next to, let's take a look at Fenrir real quick. I do have another video I made called The Loki Resonance, I think I titled it, where I do outline some of this, but I don't talk about it. But as I pointed out, to take note on how Fenrir is laying here, what I would say is that the United States is made up from Fenrir the wolf. So I'm going to say that there's a head here, and I'll kind of point it out, but I think he's got his one leg paw resting over here as Florida. This big kind of mountainous region here is the back hind leg. I think the paw kind of comes down and rests about here, the back leg, with this backside in California being of his tail. And so let's come in just a little bit and we'll take a look, because I believe if you look at this like a head, so right here is the eye. Here's his, his right eye. I believe another one would be about here, but then you take this is the forehead kind of crest area of his head right here. And then right starting here down around this line is where I'm getting the outer line of his jaw and his, his mouth and everything, and his nose would be right here in this line. Again, his eye is right here, and then he's got kind of these wolf, hairline to the face around the side of the head, to his head or face. So let's continue on. Now I've got pictures all over the earth. I've got a lot to show you. I want to spend a lot of time on, every little thing, but I also don't really want to make an hour-long video. I don't know how long this will be because it's just hard to hold people's attention. So let's take a look at Monoceros, which I believe is probably Sleipnir, the horse. Again, I've shown this one here before as well, but it's depicted as a unicorn. I don't know if Sleipnir was a unicorn. Sleipnir was also said to have had 8 legs, but that could just be, another story or whatever. I'm not here to say every story and everything ever said is the absolute truth. But I'm saying that there's enough here to say that the stories in general were true. Any myths, lores, legends, religions, beliefs, all the stories are, they have truth. So here you have this horse, and I'm going to point out here that I'm looking at like this area as a leg, this area as a leg, and then there's a head here. And then if you take a look at this as being like the horse's mane, and then you follow this body line right here being the back of the horse, and along the back side he gets kicked off by these two little legs here with some what appears to be like a hoof right here, maybe right there, just like in the back here. So of course this is the belly line. And then if you come up, we'll take a little bit closer look. I think I had an issue spotting the eye before on this and then found it later. But I want to say his eye is somewhere about right here. And then he's got like the nose, nostril area here. I know a lot of this stuff looks like surrounding other parts. But again, if you look at it as a whole, I mean, if I were to put this directly on top of this horse and blow it up and make it transparent, it's going to sit pretty much right on this outline here. All right. So also, and I know it says this in reverse, I've talked about this in other videos, the names here. It's because they're mirrored, when I've explained it before. When you're looking up at the stars, you look back down at the ground, the depictions are mirrored, which is why in some of these cases I have to flip the picture of the constellation to fit the direction of the, land or constellation on the Earth itself. But what I wanted to point out is, okay, so you've got Monoceros also being right next to Canis Minor, as I just pointed out, was Fenrir as the United States. And let's go from here to Orion. I might bounce around and not necessarily go to everything that's right next to something, because I don't want to lose you guys on something that looks too vague or whatever, doesn't stand out all that well. But right next to Monoceros being right here, depicted next to him. And again, not everything's going to be looking like they're right next to each other, too. We've taken a look at planispheres, star charts, celestial maps, what have you. Sometimes it's almost like you're looking through an open, how should I say this? From one side to the other, as in it's hard to explain. Something might look like it's next to something, but one side, it might actually be like in relation to the reverse side of the celestial globe or whatever you want to say. By the way, I do not believe that the Earth is a globe. Go ahead and lose me there if you want, but look, when I point out all this stuff, it's too big to be walking the curve of the Earth. I think Google Earth is manipulated from a flat world. But anyways, here we have Orion. And he's standing looking up this way, has perhaps some sort of a shield. He's standing off with a leg kicked up, and he's got an arm raised. Well, I'm saying that this is the head of Orion or Thor, whoever he may be. Perhaps had some sort of a shield here. He's got this big broad shoulder area or something, appears to have raised up in some way in this direction, just as the arm here. I believe his leg runs right down along with the horse's head. I think a lot of these things are piled on top of each other, but then it appears like you got this direction here, like his leg is kicked up just as depicted in the constellation. Later on, I'll try and get back to the Cerberus constellation. I don't want to take, like I said, I don't want to look at some things that are real vague up front. I want to take a look at some things that are going to pop out. And speaking of something like that, we'll look again at Scorpio. So when we're talking about, the constellations and whatnot, Scorpio is said to be along the Milky Way. He is also said to be very far away. Now, again, I've said this in other videos, but I believe that the stars represent, even according to their brightness, they're like a visual braille or sign language in the sky. The way that God set it up, these stars, is that also, depending on their brightness, I believe that bright stars are perhaps got to be very high points of land versus the faint stars, which are said to be very far away, are actually representing something that is underwater. So let's take a look at Scorpio, which is along the, what I would say right here is the Milky Way. Whoops. So you come to Scorpio. Obviously, I don't need to point out the tail and the stinger, but there you go. And then when you get up front towards the claws here, you get right up on the claw, and you start to see the little gripper teeth or whatever right up along the claw. So I'm just trying to point out, this is a claw. And I think, what, next let's go to this one right here is pretty hard to pick up on. A couple of them. Let's bounce around for a second. Show you some other things. Over here, you have, I believe this was Vulpecula. And I do believe that within this region there is like the body of this dog, fox, wolf, whatever it is. Hard to see on this one. I believe there's like head area, body area right here. 2 back legs. You know what? Let's take a look at something that's even easier to see. Some of you have seen this before in another video. But here we have the longest constellation, Hydra. And Hydra, being the Marianas Trench, I am saying is a giant cobra. I get it if you've seen this stuff before. I'm trying to put as much as I can into all, into just one video. Kind of have a here's everything you need to know type of video for everyone to watch. You've got this giant cobra, and next to it you have the constellation Tertus Solitarius. I've also seen it represented or being called the Columbo or Columba bird. Bird being right here, perhaps was said to represent the bird that brought a leaf to Noah, or the olive branch or something. And that bird stands along whatever this is right here. I'm going to say that that's whatever this thing is right here. So I'll come up close. So obviously you've got like the snake, the hood of the snake in the back. And this being the head, you can even take a closer look. So right here's the eye. He's got the slit for his like snake eye right here. Obviously, then the mouth, and they almost got like this snake's little hump in the nose, nostril area right here, and it looks like he's got his tongue out right up alongside the back of this bird. Take a look. And then the bird itself. So you got like this eye, you've got the beak, mouth, he's got a little bird nostril in his beak, and he's got all this feathering going down the backside of the bird, wing area. And then just like down at the tail of a bird, the feathers go straight down. So you see where his back tail feathers would be. Okay. Not sure. Let me see here. Where are we at? I do believe that Andromeda is going to be pretty much this area. Like this is the upper body, or from about right here. Just going to take a look at this. So you get kind of like this upside down body, this being the head upside down, looking off to the side, looking this way, just like in the picture here, because it's just interesting that you have, like Andromeda had these chains with a spike or spear tip, whatever, and you've got these lines being drawn down, perhaps something to do with that there in the constellation. I wanted to point out Pegasus. Pegasus is going to be like right here. I might come back to Pegasus because I know for that part, I think I'm going to have to remove this map to kind of show you the outline of the horse head. And take note that when you're looking at constellations, they often only depict so much of the constellation, not a whole body on everything. Good example of that. May as well just go ahead and take a look at Taurus. So I believe we've got Taurus in this area. We've got Aries over here, possibly, the head of Capricorn. Let's just get a closer look at what looks to be Taurus in this area, the bull. And I think I've done this as well in another video. But, you see Taurus is only done from like the front half, got horns up, legs down, the face. So I think Taurus is only really shown on the earth from like about his front half of his body, being around this area here roughly. Comes over, got what appears to be like a leg, hoof, something coming down. I get it, not everything is so in your face and ready to pop out, but obviously we wouldn't have Google Earth if everything was so obvious. But you come up to the head here, and I believe this area right here was an eye, and this was one of his horns. And then this being the front area of his nose, mouth, what have you. I've actually put this picture, blown it up right up along this, and made it transparent, and that's it pretty much lays right on top perfectly. How about this for a little side note? I do think there's a little bat right here too. I don't have a constellation for this bat, but just interesting. I guess we'll take a look since we're right here. If you can consider like an ear, and then this is like the head of a bat, an eye right here. He's got that bat kind of almost like a pig nose, big fat nose, couple of teeth, mouth, but perhaps one of his ears is busted off. I don't know, but the real interesting part is like that bat finger that you get, right? So you get these little whatever hinges, hooks at the end, nail, something. I think there's a bat right here. I digress. I don't have a constellation for it. I'm not saying there's not one. I don't have all 88 constellations here. I don't have them all memorized. I didn't find them all. I'm just trying to show that perhaps I have found enough. That's all I'm trying to show you guys here today. So I think that's we've got Aries, the ram, is kind of just laid down. Front legs bent inward. To me, it appears, and Aries is going to be right next to Taurus. I'm pretty sure that there would have been an eye here, whatever, nose, mouth, something, but I believe this to be the dead, decaying body of Aries. Perhaps he had that small little tail back there, but the legs bent in. He's laying down. Here's another interesting thing. I mean, it's been depicted for a long time. People think, well, they're just doing artwork in these old manuscripts and illuminations depicting the land as, some person or whatever. So I believe that this is a body right here, head, maybe two eyes were right here, here, and here. Mouth area, the arm is extending down, if you see what I'm going with right here. And you can tell that this is representing this literally because you got Africa right next to it. So it says Africa right there. I think that United Kingdom or Britain, whatever, is going to be Leo. Leo is possibly a manticore, if you want to look that up. I think there would have been like the head right here, nose, mouth, kind of beard, and then the body is, if you take a look at, I don't know, United Kingdom or Britain or English flags or whatever, go to look at their shields, their flags, they've got lions kind of more bodied like this, all squirrely in the back, and that is literally what their country looks like, is a squirrely backside of a lion. Here's the head. So Leo here. Let's take a look at I want to go to the Phoenix or whatever next, but I guess whatever. We'll just knock this one out real quick. It's just a simple little head picture. I just thought it was interesting. I found it in one of my Book of the Beasts or bestiary books. I don't know. I've got several things in my home library on my bookshelf. But I had found this picture, which I thought it was really interesting. Let's kind of go along with this right here. It's almost, why did they make this picture? Why is there something on the land that looks like it? And I would say, so probably Capricorn as a goat. Looks like this thing's taking a bite out of something. But you almost get this weird front nose shape. Almost looks like there's a little ball or something. It's going to bite from the shin of this goat or whatever. And then it's got like this odd eye here. I mean, you can see it's followed behind by this, what looks to be some sort of a horn or something. And it's got the eye right here. So it just looks interesting to me. I wanted to kind of show that. I hope you guys really, take a look at this stuff. Get on here on your own. Let's take a look. I don't remember was this Aquila? I might have Aquila and another bird constellation mixed up. Either one's the one or it's the other. But either way, there's a few bird constellations. Also, there was this depiction of a Phoenix constellation. So what I've shown it before, but like take for example, this is feathering. I'll say going back here, this line represents like a wingspan. If you take a look, coming all the way down, but real quick, we'll go up close. So you have like this neck area of this big bird or phoenix or whatever it is. You would have the eye right here, and his beak comes out like this. So follow this neck. And you come down where it should be, roughly, there would have been like a leg here. And his leg comes out and he's got claws right here. And then when you follow at the end of his wing, just like you would see again at the end of a bird's wings or something, instead of the feathering going this way, the feathers come out and away. This to me just looks like the feathering of the end of a wing. And I guess we're here at Cetus. So let's take a look at Cetus. So I think, obviously, I would say some of his body, a lot of his body is over the water and some of the body is under the water. I think his eye would be about here. And you see he's got these like goofy hands, long, weird fingers. I think, this thing appears to have some fingering and whatever like that. And then he's got like this wrapped around tail with some interesting fin type features. And so it looks to be like there's something wrapped around. And I would say that these little features here are, appear to be according with this design, what have you. I do believe that let's go over here real quick. Later on when we get to like the Australia part, I think that should be pretty interesting. I don't have much more to show before we get to that point, but real quick, let's take a look at, I believe this was Camelopardalis. So you've got this big thing right here, Camelopardalis. Along next to it is Rangifer and Boots, or Cepheus, but I think it's Boots. It does say Cepheus there, but I think they're maybe one and the same. So I'll come out just a little bit for a second. if you look how like this thing's got its head up top, long neck, or it's just huge. Looks like it would be a bigger constellation. I know a lot of you have seen like Roger's channel. He thinks there's a Leviathan fish or shit. And a dragon over here. I don't see this way. I take it as, I think there's maybe an eye area here. Comes up to a nose, open mouth. This is the front of the mouth, lower jaw area here. This is perhaps like a big ear. And then heading on downward would continue his neck down to the rest of his body. And I believe Rangifer is this hunk of land right here. So this was a depiction of Rangifer that I found. It's kind of leaping thing with some horns or something. Again, this is not going to stand out too well. Like I said, nothing on the land is going to... These are decaying bodies after thousands of years, right? So, but I believe it had like an open mouth area here. Probably had some horn or something, but I believe the head was here, and the rest of the body is this land. So, take a look at that. Now, Boots or Cepheus, I think he's laid out pretty much on top of Cattalopardalis, and one interesting feature on the land, I think, is this sickle right here. Let's take a look. Let me just turn this a little bit. So I think roughly his body is this region here, but specifically I would say like this is his head here, and then he has this sickle right here. I would say, probably has a mouth, lips area right here, had a nose, eye, that being the backside of his head. But I just thought it was interesting finding, if you're trying to really reason with what makes up features of land, I think it's interesting to look at this feature here. It's very similar to this sickle that he is holding in his hand, and the fact that it is along the backside of Camelopardalis, where I believe that to be. Take a look at another body right here real quick, actually. Some stories and testimonies talk about, heavenly bodies, angels, whatever, beings in heaven. They have these robed outfits. They make cloth, this and that, robes. I believe that this right here is all a body laid out. Obviously, this being like the head area, who knows, maybe an eye, and a mouth. Let's take a look real quick at this. Okay, so maybe this was Cepheus, and maybe that's why it says Cepheus so close to the Camelopardalis one, while it didn't necessarily name Rangifer or Boots, but it was next to it. So right above Camelopardalis, we have Cepheus, and he's got, this crown. He's looking up. He's laid out, legs down, and he's holding whatever this staff or something in his hand. And so you have this body. It looks like there's a bunch of cloth making up the land on top of it. However, it's, it makes these wavy looks to the land as opposed to, the features of this style land over here. So this is like the head, the body, and he's kind of got like his legs, or here's a leg, and then his other leg is wrapped up here with his foot out, perhaps right there. So that to me looks like just one big giant body, and that is Cepheus in this area. I think I want to go over to Australia. Just trying to think if I've really missed anything. I'd like to argue for the Pisces fish. This one is very vague. So I don't think I'm going to necessarily persuade anyone specifically on this area, but the Pisces fish were not just said to be fish, they were said to be lizard fish. And it was really interesting before I had all this stuff to go along with. I remember when I was like looking at artwork, I could see things of reality and truth hidden in artwork. And one thing I saw, I should have brought it up, but I don't want to sway from the flow of this video, if you can call it that. But I noticed in the artwork, it was like a big serpent, almost like an anaconda or something, bursting out of water. But in the waves of the water was this design, which I recognized to be as like these two heads I had pointed out in the waves, especially from this one here. But I believe that there's like a head here, kind of mouth line. Eye would have been right here of one of the lizard fish, and they're bound together, as you can see depicted here, for whatever reason. I don't know, I guess. But you come down, and then there was this part, which was very interesting in the artwork that I was looking at. It showed in the waves there was like an eye, the front kind of nose part down to the mouth and bottom jaw, when then it had like fins that came off to the side here. So again, I feel like these are the Pisces lizard fish 1 and 2. Let's take a look over here. I don't really want to show you Canis Major. I do believe that Canis Major, look, I can't really argue this one. There's just not enough to see. But I do believe that there's probably a head right here, probably an eye right here, down to like the nose and whatnot. This was supposed to be a pretty big dog, fast greyhound type of dog. And what was that, Lepus or something, Lupus something was next to him. Let's go over here. Perhaps I would say that possibly this is the lynx right here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. It's an interesting little area on the earth. I think maybe there was an eye here, head of the nose or something, and then he has like this back area. Again, another vague spot, but I'm just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Feel free to give me your thoughts. If you want me to do any further something on this side or the other, sure. But let's take a look down here. So there's a lot going on in this scene. One, you have like the beasts of Daniel, what he saw in his vision from the clouds. Let's just take a look real quick. We'll go along with the pictures, and then I'll point out the land. So Daniel had a vision. From the clouds, he saw 4 beasts, one being like a lion, one being like a bear, one having 4 heads, and then one that had, I don't think this is a good depiction here, not the best, but it had like 7 heads and 10 crowns. That represented the dragon that will arise from the abyss and be, take out 1/3 of the stars or whatever with its tail. Now, interesting thing here, this is Daniel's dream map. I did a video on Daniel's dream map, but I only really did it with a song. I didn't talk about it. Here's the thing. So they thought it was like a depiction of Europe, Asia, Africa, where he saw these beasts. But the thing is Daniel doesn't mention land around the beasts. He says he sees them all standing in or surrounded by the water. And that would make sense because, there wasn't land back then. They make up the land. Like, perhaps there was, we can get into another subject of whether things are soil or come from the tree of life. But when we're talking continental crusts and stone, those are petrified, living things is the difference. So here I'm saying, and if you look at it, let me come in like this. This is Daniel's dream map, which was made in like the 1530s, something like that. Said to be Europe, Asia, and Africa. But if you look at this as a whole right here, and even down to here, you'll realize that this is Australia, and this is all the surrounding area that comes up and kind of like a hump back here down to this tip, which is all of this land mass or contour under the sea that comes down to here. I mean, it's up in the way that it comes up like this. Look how it comes up same way. This is a perfect match. This is amazing because it shows the supernatural right here. I mean, you have a guy that, first of all, wouldn't have been anywhere over here and been able to, or any of these guys, they wouldn't have made a map. None of these guys from the 1500s would have made a map, especially using land that's underwater. Now, if Daniel saw what he saw it from the clouds. It'd be true if there's beasts here, and we'll take a look at some stuff. I'm just explaining the importance of this. It shows, this map couldn't have been made, and he couldn't have seen. No one could have seen this. No one could have made this map using land that's underwater. How would they know in the 1500s what's under the Pacific Ocean? However, let's come over here for a second. There were stories such as, similar to Atlantis, you have the lost continent of Mu, or sometimes referred to as Meru. And when you get these stories, they're always depicting with like this 7-headed serpent, right? You got all these 7 heads on these serpents coming out of the water, 7 heads, all these stories. And yes, coming out of the water. So let's take a look real quick. Bear with me, I don't mean to make everything so long. I hope you guys are still sticking with it because, like I said, I'm not the best presenter, but I think the truth is here to be found, and you can take of it everything that you can. So Atlantis' story was in the Atlantic, and I believe, by the way, that was the body of that Phoenix or Aquila constellation. Here you have Meru, or Mu, whichever. And even still, take a look at the shape, even how it comes down, just like we saw in Daniel's dream map, right next to Australia. Now, this gets interesting. So we know about it now. I think back in like the 80s or something, they did this underwater sonar reading or whatever. So this is called Zealandia. Zealandia, also known as the New Zealand continent or Tasmantis, is an almost entirely submerged mass of continental crust that sank after breaking away from Australia 60 to 85 million years ago, having blah, blah, blah. They called it a continental crust. Basically, what they get into saying is that this is an eighth continent on the earth. So let's take a look at this real quick. Revelation 17, 10, and 11. There are kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is. So here. 1 is. The other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. The beast that was and is not. It is an eighth, but it belongs to the 7. And here they're showing with representation of 7-headed beast, many crowns. This is crazy, right? So, I don't know. I guess I'll still need to show you why, but quick point, though, for all you Pangea lovers out there. Sure, if you want to say all this makes sense, fine. But the one thing that doesn't make sense when it comes to Pangea is Antarctica, because here's Australia depicted in almost the same shape as Zealandia. Now, if Zealandia is next to Australia and it takes up this type of space right here, then where was Antarctica in your picture? That's just a little side thought I have. Again, I don't believe the Earth to be a globe. I think Antarctica is a surrounding wall. And I believe that this area was made up by Zealandia right here. Now, let's just take a look at what I think is the main head real quick. Sorry, these things are goofy. I'm not too good with this. Okay. So you come to this feature. I'm saying like all these little branchings of this area are the heads. Here is basically a main head to what I'm talking about. This being like the 7-headed beast dragon down in the abyss of the sea. You've got a head here. It comes down. Here's like his open mouth, bottom jaw with teeth. He's got his eye here. Now, he had another head or the tail coming down back this way. I think, hang on. I think there was another head right here. Comes out. Would have had an eye. Head comes around like this up towards like the nose or mouth area. Maybe had some crowns or spikes here. Going off to the side, not everything is clear, but you know, so if there was a neck and a head, the same thing going on over here. Here's perhaps one that maybe 2. So you come up the neck of this one. Here's like a horn. So they have crowns, horns. Here's perhaps possibly another horn, or that's the leaf to Turdosaurus, I don't know. But you come up here and it almost looks like, there's a slit for an eye right here. And then he had like his mouth being open, perhaps a nostril right here. You come up along this side and it almost looks like it starts to be another head, like an eye peeking out over. I mean, look at It kind of looks like an eye right here. And then you come up along the head of the nose, a nostril. Let's take a look at Australia in the other direction. These are not easy to point out here. I would suggest watching, because really only the bear, I think, stands out pretty well. But in my other video, Daniel's Dream Map Solved, I have it outlined on the land of what I'm looking at, that there's a head here. This is part of the four-headed beast is what I'm trying to say right here. There was a head in this area. There's a head in this area right here. And then there is a last head that comes up over here. The lion, I would say is basically the head of the lion is here. There's like a mouth, bottom chin, lion's fur, whatnot going on. Backside of the head, like I said, the eye would be right here. But the bear, I think, actually stands out kind of well. So if you take like this being the front area, this is like the back and side, and this right here being the head, right here. So if you take a look, here's an eye. And then you've got like the bear's nose in this area, and then the bear head teeth. And then right here's like this ear of the bear. So eye, nose, mouth, teeth, ear. This is the bear. Daniel saw these beasts. And anyways, in my video, Daniel's Dream Solved, I do outline, like draw in exactly what I'm showing. I'm not really going to try and show you the four heads of the beast right here, because it's very difficult to see. I had to study and like really look at this stuff up close, try and reason with every piece of land, whatever, anything that looks the way that it does. I had to try and, I don't know. It's an interesting location. Whoops. Okay, just stop. This is just really weird to me. I don't know. I've got this, I don't even know if there's a legit Minotaur constellation known to us or not, but I just thought, I did a video a long time ago, talked about the Minotaur found. You can take a look at that. Basically, there appears to be the outline of something here, perhaps a body area, and I just think it's really interesting the way that these kind of do these triangular designs in this depiction. Whoever made this image, I think, knows something, and I think for whatever reason it appears to go along with this area here. I think there's maybe perhaps what was two legs. Various depictions of the Minotaur was found in, I don't know, almost like this kilt or skirt type looking area, but you come up top. So he's got his body here, and then perhaps there was a head here, down to his nose, his like bull nose, teeth from wherever his jawline was. Stop moving. Jeez. An eye, perhaps his like bull ear, and then he had two horns that came up. Take a look at this stuff for yourself. I'm just about done here. Maybe we'll take a look at just a couple other little things. Man, where am I? All right, Let's do this. So you have the Eridanus River. Am I looking at this at the right angle? Eridanus River, for whatever reason, a river is another constellation, kind of does this like swirly pattern. I think that went along with whatever this is right here. Perhaps this was the Eridanus River. This is up top, kind of North Pole, Middle Earth, whatever you want to say. But that's the Eridanus River as far as I can tell. Now here's something else. It's kind of a little bonus thing to throw in here. I'm going to remove something real quick. I'm going to remove that map. I think it was the third one down. Don't do weird stuff. Come on. That's not what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. I'm going to get rid of this. Great. See, this is why I said I'm really bad with computers. I don't know how to fix what I just did. Okay. I just thought this was a little, as far as I'm concerned, everything is something. So I just thought this was a little interesting piece of land right here. You get these depictions of the griffins, and it looks to be like it's just in the water. Obviously, there's not a whole griffin here, but I think this is a really strange piece of land. If you believe all the land is something, I just figured it'd be cool to take a look at this one, because it almost appears to be like, I don't know, you could have had like, if this is a head and face area up here, and the neck goes out of the back, perhaps this broke off as what would have been like a wing or something back here. The body's underwater, but it almost looks like, see how it changes right here at the tip? Like this was a beak, and then there would be an eye right here. I'm thinking to myself, this is probably, just like on the Tartarian flags and whatever, you see all these things about griffins. I just think this is an interesting piece of land, and that's what came to mind when I was looking at it. This looks like a beak. This looks like, a depression area where an eye is. And again, the way it kind of comes up, almost like there was a wing there, is just really interesting. Again, you can tell me what you think. Maybe you think I'm crazy. I'm sure I'm going to hear plenty of that, but take a look at just a couple more things and then I'll call it. This one right here is very goofy. I forget what they even call these things, but Sagittarius is whatever I believe one of these guys right here are, and this is a very old depiction. I forget which one of my books I pulled it out of it. Probably some bestiary or something. If you take a look, he's got these kind of googly eyes, the way they depict him, shooting an arrow. But I think Sagittarius is what kind of runs up, for, as Russia leading up next to Alaska. And I don't know, I just think like there'd be kind of his goofy eye was right here in this area, another goofy eye in this area, and then he had like the opening of his mouth with his lips right here, and this is his strange head. So this is his chin, and then he's shooting an arrow, and if you take a look down here, he's got where his body would have come down, and then all of a sudden you get this feature. What is that? Was that part of the arrow or what? I don't know, or whatever weapon he really used. I don't know. I just feel like this land is got to be made up by a Sagittarius. And there's all kinds of goofy little Easter eggs. I mean, is this the body of a bull or ram or something here? You got a head, you got front legs, you got these two back hind legs right here in the back. This is right up next to one of the dragons I've shown before, right here in the Pacific. You got the eye, the nostril, mouth with a couple little teeth. So you got this like dragon face and head right here. He's got this little spike on his back. Pause the video, take a look. If you don't see it yet, pause it until you see it because it's there. I guess I'll remove was that Hydra? Let me try and find Hydra. Okay. I just, this is one of the most vague, but whatever, I'm going to show it anyway, because if it's supposed to be there, it's supposed to be there. Not too far from Andromeda is supposed to be the Pegasus constellation, and I just happened to see like what looks to be the outline of a horse's head right here. Kind of the inner mouth, here's the bottom of the jaw, wraps up down here, but you got this eye area right here, and they only really show the front part of Pegasus. Perhaps there's more to see that I didn't pick up on as far as his legs or something go that I'm missing down here, but I think there's the head of Pegasus right here. Anyways, let's see. I'll probably just show you one last thing, and that's going to be the logo to my channel, the little horse. Maybe I'll show you a couple of things real quick, actually. All right, right here. So this too is a constellation. Now what sucks is I literally just found this the other day. They are changing. You can see the difference because this was the logo of my channel. This is the land area that I took it from. And you can see that it no longer clears up. So they're still updating the land to where it shows you less and less detail. I had another video, I called it like the unicorn found. I'm not saying this is necessarily a unicorn, but I definitely believe to be it some biblical horse. And in there it talks about, even in the Bible, about binding the horse with band or the unicorn with band at the furrows. Now I used to be able to get right up close onto this thing, and right up along this band, and show you how it was like this weathered banding. And like the horse's mane up top here was very horse mane like, but then along the face it was very detailed. The lines, the little lines of the small fine horse hairs that are on a horse's face. So this is what told me, like, look, as I'm as unprepared as I am to make this video right now, this is why I have to do it, because they're taking away what's really there. We don't get to see the earth as it really is. I mean, if it was all really there, this stuff probably would pop right out at us, and we'd all be like, what is going on? You know, everybody would know the truth if we had Google Earth with honesty. So here, let's just take a look real quick. This was Equus, if I'm saying that right, the little horse. The faint constellation Equus is the second smallest constellation in the sky. Its name means little horse or foal. It's thought that Ptolemy invented this constellation when he charted the sky for the Almagest, adding it to his catalog of star shapes to fill in what he perceived as a void in his map of the stars. Because its roots aren't as ancient as those of other constellations, and it wouldn't be, because obviously the bigger things were like made first, and then we kind of get dropped down to smaller beings. Take us, for example. We're not big like any of this other stuff. They get smaller and smaller. Anyways, because its roots aren't as ancient as those of other constellations, Equus is not really associated with any particular myth, though horses were certainly an important part of commerce and culture in Ptolemy's time, overshadowed in size and magnitude by the nearby constellation Pegasus, which was not far away, as I showed you. I mean, we're still in the Milky Way area. That was just over near, right off of Russia-China area in the Pacific. Nearby constellation Pegasus, which has a large body and huge feathered wings. Equus is commonly depicted as a small horse's head, with its body usually missing from illustrated star maps. The name of its brightest star, Catalpha, comes from the Arabic for a piece of the horse. And there you have it. They know damn well there's just a piece here. We only got the head. And I'm sorry I can't clear this up really any better. Not much I can do with the resolution on that. It was a picture I took a long time ago to use as my logo, but look, back when I used to be able to get right up to this thing real close, you saw all the details. That one kind of made me sad to see that, you know, of all things that got changed, it was the logo that I used for my channel. From there, I guess I don't have much more, but, you know, I guess I figured I'd say that, you know, Cerberus is also a constellation, and seen right up with like Orion or whatever. I think that's Orion that they're depicted as. But anyways, Cerberus is like a three-headed beast. Cerberus is another tough one to point out, but I think that one of the heads is right here. And it's almost like a T-Rex, probably where they got the, you know, it's darn near where they got the, whatever you want to call it, to design the T-Rex. But if you ask me, it almost looks like this is like a eyebrow bridge right here. Comes up to the nose. This is the open mouth area. You can even see what looks like to be little teeth right here. And the bottom of the jaw. So you got this, like, there's a jaw where the eye would be. Back top of the neck. Bottom of the neck. So I think that there was a head here. And then I also believe that another one of the necks is like this is a top or bottom of the neck. and which would have come up to perhaps this was an eye, and then either, this is like the front of the jawline or front of the nose, something like that. It's pretty hard to look at, but I'm just trying to be reasonable, because if I think one thing or several things or enough things are reasonable enough to say that the land is what it is, and I believe many of us at this point in the subject of mud fossils and looking into whatever you look into, but I mean, as far as scripture and myths and legends go, if there's enough to prove that some of it is, then it's pretty reasonable to just think that all of it is something, and I'm just trying to figure out what it is. I may not know what it is. I may not know who every one of these things are to the T, but I think that there is enough evidence to say, things like Scorpio are pretty clear. Things like Hydra, the Mariana's Trench being a giant cobra or whatever else. I think some of these things are clear enough to say that it all is something. And I truly believe that what the land is represented by constellations. And you take the old stories, just like Odysseus or someone else like Jason and the Argonauts. These stories include guys that would travel the seas, and they'd never been to land on the other side of the seas because, but they knew that the land would be there because they had a star chart or a star map. They'd go pick up a map and it would say, follow these stars and you'll find land. Well, that's a pretty interesting thing to say. Why is that? Why would the stars tell you where land are on Earth? Because the stars represent the land. And if all the stars are focused on the land and the Earth, then that is very important. What that says is that we are indeed, in fact, very significant, very singular, and we are the center of creation. So thanks for watching.